I decided to write a novel based on the story of the Dozier School because when I first heard about it in the summer of 14, the story stayed with me. Mm-hmm. It was a very rough summer in America. We had the protests and riots in Ferguson, Missouri over the murder of Michael Brown. A few weeks later, Eric Garner, who's a black man in New York City selling bootleg cigarettes, was strangled to death by a white policeman in a chokehold. And then I found out about the Dozier School. They had found a couple of dozen unmarked graves and were trying to figure out what happened to these children. And it just seemed that there's so many unknown stories we don't hear about. If there's one incident of police brutality, how many are happening that we don't capture on videotape? If there's one place like Dozier, how many other places exist where the same kind of abuse is happening? And I'm not sure if I'd come across the story 6 months later or 6 months or before, if it would have stayed with me. But wanting to know what life was like for the black students on the campus made me think, what kind of story could I generate out of this real life story? Well, in terms of the audience reception of the book, I've been very glad people seem to have gotten it. The success of Underground Railroad was very surprising. You know, I was just doing my usual thing, trying not to screw up my idea page by page. And so when people embraced it so warmly, I was very glad, and I didn't know how the follow-up would be embraced. But I've been very, excited and grateful that people have got the story. Since the book has come out, I've talked to a few survivors. They've come to events or reached out via email, and they said they'd like the book. I'm not sure if they're just humoring me, but so far they seem to like it. And if the book captures 10% of what they actually went through, some bit of truth of their experience, I'm very glad. So I've been very heartened by the response so far. It's not my usual thing to write two books in a row that communicate with each other. But of course, slavery is a kind of institutionalized racism and exertion of power. And life under Jim Crow in a reform school like the one I write about is also another form of institutionalized racism. So they're both attack different periods in American history, but there is that continuum of oppression, continuum of humiliation. Slavery has one way of controlling black people's lives, and under Jim Crow and segregation, the United States government found different ways of controlling and placing a boundary around black people's lives. And so usually I try to do like a more serious book or then a lighter book, but I felt compelled, especially in the age of Donald Trump, to try and sort out my own feelings about where the country's going, my feelings of hope, my feelings of pessimism. And in Elwood and Turner, the two characters in this book, I found a way to sort of help figure out how I was feeling about my country, and that meant doing two heavy books in a row. How's America doing today? I think it's pretty terrible. I think we're 2.5 years into a very corrupt, racist, oppressive regime. And even if we get a new president in a year and a half, the world is burning. The global warming is devastating the planet. And so I think in America, I think in the world at large, we really have to get our act together all across Europe, other places. We have a rise in nationalist, right-wing leaders and regimes. And it'll be a while before we, I think, purge our system of these really negative people.